Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Just Another Talk.
She was once a star CEO on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, but now a judge has sentenced this startup founder turned fraudster to 7 years in prison after being convicted of duping a major investment bank out of a staggering $175 million.
We started Frank with
Damn.
really thinking about how are we the ally for the student and the family.
Charlie Javice sold her startup company called Frank to JP Morgan Chase back in 2021. At the time, she claimed her company, which helped streamline the financial aid process for low-income college students, had millions of users. But after the deal went through, JP Morgan discovered that number was close to just 300,000, and Javice had fabricated most of the user information. Javice, now 33, was convicted in March, prosecutors requesting a 12-year prison sentence, but her lawyer asking for lenience, dismissing comparisons between Javice and disgraced entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes, claiming that Javice's company was real, unlike Holmes's company Theranos, which sold a fake blood testing product. Javice's lawyer also arguing the bank shouldered some responsibility, saying it was a 28-year-old versus 300 investment bankers from the largest bank in the world, and claiming they rushed the acquisition. The judge agreeing the bankers do shoulder some blame, but adding the sentencing hearing was about punishing Javice's conduct, not JP Morgan's stupidity. Along with the 7-year prison sentence, the judge also ordering Javice to pay nearly $300 million in restitution, telling her, "I don't think you'll be committing other crimes, but others have to be deterred."
And Javice remains free on bail as she appeals her conviction.
That's crazy. So we got a couple factors to go over. Obviously, she sold the company for 175 million, but she's being sued for 287 million. So if my math serves me, she's gonna owe a shit ton of money to JP Morgan and Chase. And I think it's kind of funny what her lawyer said, which was basically, that JP Morgan and Chase rushed the sale, but also acted, for lack of a better term, stupidly. Which I think is funny because if you think about why we have the system of law that we do, outside of the conspiracy theories aspect of it, but the reason we have laws is because stupid people get taken advantage of. Basically, if you really think about it. Granted, I'm gonna be politically correct here. I understand that there are some crimes that are worse than others and should never happen and those things. But when we're talking about fraud specifically, it's pretty much kind of a stupid thing, right? You have someone who says one thing or portrays something, and then someone who's a buyer or a consumer is like, "Oh, okay, I believe you. Here's my money." And then the person takes their money and runs off, and the person who is buying the item or the service or the company for this matter is left, for lack of a better term, screwed. The fact that the lawyer said that's kind of stupid. And so I have here an article too that I kind of wanted to read a little bit of it, and it does cover some of the things that were said in the video, but I just want to go over it. And it says Charlie Javice, founder of the startup acquired by JP Morgan Chase in 2021 for 175 million, was sentenced to just over 7 years in prison Monday for defrauding the bank by overstating how many customers the fintech firm had. In March, a 12-person jury found Javice and her chief growth officer, Olivia Amar, guilty on 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Prosecutors have sought a sentence of 12 years. 12 years is a long time, and that sucks. She only got 7, so she got, a little bit more than half, I guess you could say. About a year and a half more than half, but still, 12 years is 7 years is the longest time. Listen, any time in jail is a long time. I don't care what nobody says. I know I'm not trying to go to jail. No, thank you. But anyway, so Javice, 33, cried as she delivered an emotional statement to the court Monday. Hell yeah, she cried. I would have cried too. I want to cry now for her. Not really, but still, yeah, I get my point. Standing to address the judge, Javice says she felt profound remorse for her actions and asked for forgiveness from JP Morgan employees, of the startup shareholders, and investors. You think she meant that apology, or she was just saying that because now she's about to serve 7 years in jail? I wonder if they're gonna send her to like a max jail, like a super max jail. It's over 5 years, so it's not like she can serve in just like a regular county jail, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, at this point, Gervais turned and directly addressed her family sitting in in the front row to apologize and thank them for what she called unwavering support. I will spend my entire life regretting these errors, or just the last 7 years. Well, no, technically, because she is being sued for 287 million in restitution. So if she don't got that in the bank, she gonna be paying restitution for a while. So I kind of feel that sentiment. I'm asking with all my heart for forgiveness, she said. I ask your honor to temper justice with mercy. I will accept your judgment with dignity and humility. I laugh because she has no other choice. Just what she's saying. I shouldn't laugh. No, I should laugh. This is funny. Judge Alvin Hellerstein told Gervais her words were very moving and that the way she's devoted her life is highly commendable, but that he couldn't give her the forgiveness she sought. Let that last sentence sink in. Not the forgiveness she sought, not that part. Her words were very moving. That's what he said. Then he said that how she's devoted her life is highly commendable. I don't think that's very accurate. I wouldn't consider building a business that technically only had 300,000 users, saying it had over 4.25 million users, a commendable way to live your life. Some people might argue with me on this point, and I've made this argument myself, where it's like, it's JP Morgan and Chase. They're screwing people left and right. It's only fair they get screwed once or twice. I can understand that sentiment, but they're not necessarily getting screwed, right? Because they did go to court and they are going to get some kind of restitution. So they're not necessarily screwed. The people who really are screwed, I would say, are the people using the app, the investors, and anyone else who's tied to the app that's not at the level of JP Morgan and Chase or at the level of, a high net worth investor. Because usually investors in companies like this aren't always like extremely high net worth. I'm curious who some of the investors were. And I think, again, that the judge saying this is like, you've lived your life highly commendable. That sounds like bullshit. I sentence people not because they're bad, but because they do bad things, Hellerstein told Gervais before delivering the 85-month prison sentence. I don't think you'll be committing any other crimes and that you'll be devoting your life to service, but others have to be deterred. Oh, she'll be devoting her life to service, all right? Paying that 287 mil back is going to be all the service she's going to be able to offer. But then again, she did build a company that sold to JP Morgan and Chase for 175 mil, so she might just do it all over again, and hopefully this time she doesn't commit fraud. Anyways, in addition to prison, Gervais was sentenced to 3 years of supervision along with 22.36 million in forfeiture and 287 million in restitution to JP Morgan. She will remain out on bail while she appeals the ruling. Damn, so it's over 300 mil. So she's at what, 310 million dollars? That's still a lot of fucking money. Let's see what the JP acquisition was like. JP Morgan bought the startup called Frank to help the biggest US bank buy assets. US bank buy asset market. It's what? Am I reading this right or is there a misprint here? Hold on. Wait. JP Morgan bought the startup called Frank to help the biggest US bank buy assets market its financial products to students. What? US bank buy assets? I'm confused here. Man, public school has clearly failed me here. To help the biggest U.S. bank buy assets, market its financial products to students. Okay, I guess sure. Let's just agree to disagree on that sentence. Frank was a detailed platform that helped students apply for financial aid. In September 2021, JP Morgan told CNBC in an exclusive interview on the deal that the fintech firm had served more than 5 million students since Javice founded it. But months after the deal closed, JP Morgan disclosed that Frank had fewer than 300,000 real customers. The rest were synthetic identities created by Gervais with the help of a data scientist. Oh yeah, no, she's all the way guilty. No. Oh, I take that back. She's all the way guilty. That's crazy. So she had under 300,000 users and then created a database that made it seem like she had 4.2 million users. That's bonkers. That's more than 75% of the people using the app are fake. Gervais was arrested in 2023 on charges that she defrauded JP Morgan in a deal. Details then emerged later showed that Frank employees expressed disbelief when Gervais directed them to boost their customer roster before the acquisition. The week before selling her company to JP Morgan Chase, Gervais directed an employee to fabricate millions of users. When the employee declined, Gervais reassured him according to testimony given earlier this year. She said, "Don't worry, I don't want to end up in an orange jumpsuit," the employee testified. Theranos. On Monday, Gervais' attorney Ronald Sylvan argued for a lighter sentence for his client, making the case that Frank helped customers. He contrasted the case against that of Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos Infirmary, whose fraud, he said, had dangerous medical consequences and who was sentenced to 135 months in prison. Mr. Gervais' sentence should be nowhere near Elizabeth Holmes, Sullivan told Judge Hellenstein. Assistant U.S. Attorney Micah Ferguson disagreed, arguing that Gervais' crime was fueled by greed. J.P. Morgan didn't get a functioning business; they acquired a crime scene. Ferguson said. It is what it is at this point. A courtroom sketch of Charlie Javice at her sentencing court on September 29, 2005. So this was yesterday. No, yeah, this was like 3 days ago, Monday of this week, depending on when you're watching this, but yeah, so September 29th of 2025. The episode was embarrassing for JP Morgan, which was thought to be one of the most sophisticated of corporate acquirers. Concerned about threats from fintech and big tech firms, the bank led by CEO Jamie Dimon went on a shopping spree of smaller fintech firms starting in 2020. But JP Morgan, eager to edge out rivals bidding for startup, failed to confirm that Frank actually had millions of customers before shelling out 175 million for the company. And so that's a prime example of why you should do your due diligence, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're buying a business, whether you're buying a product, and this just goes to show you that just because you have money and resources doesn't mean that there can't be fraud committed against you. And this is probably a perfect example of that, because Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase, is revered as one of the leading CEOs currently, and possibly on the list of greatest of in American history. So, despite of what you may think of the banking system with JP Morgan and Chase, or even the JP Morgan family, it is what it is. He's brought a lot of good things to JP Morgan as a company, and he's bolstered their overall value, right? And he's a smart dude as well. So you got to give him credit where credit is due, but they definitely, as Americans say, they screwed the pooch, which, sidebar, who came up with this thought of screwing the pooch? Like, was there somebody who decided to screw a pooch and then was like, yeah, that was a bad idea, so now we're gonna use that? Like, that's I'm curious, but regardless, I digress, because that has nothing to do with this talk. But yeah, with that, I think it's been I think this is an interesting story, and I would be surprised if the appeal gets her anything less than the 7 years. But if it does get her less than 7 years, then I guess, looking as she does, I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, or I wouldn't be shocked if she gets less. So with that, let's jump into the